Okay, so I wanted to start out by mentioning two things that I had in yesterday. One is that I mentioned that I probably didn't understand what Taisus Rashi seemed to be suggesting, that in relation to Shayotz's Manasho Revia, that the time has passed for the rain and they haven't yet um, received it, so there's no point in making additional fasts. You already did 13 fasts, so you're going to make now 14 fast. There's man for rain fast. I said the partial understanding of that would be because you in Cheshvan only have the Yechidim fasting. Kislev, when you start the series of fasts, Monday, Thursday, Monday, Thursday, at the time you do 13 fasts, you're already taking care of Kislev, right? Your Tevis, Shvat. You've already taken care of all those months. Why is Tesis focusing? Yotza Zman Shoravia. Tesis Zman Revia the Yera have it Mar Cheshvan. The Yotza Mar Cheshvan. And Rashi also like it's talking about Cheshvan. Cheshvan you didn't even start the fasting. So if you look at Benu Gershom here, I'm not going to have a chance to read it here, but if you take a look, the Benu Gershom literally says what we said yesterday, which is Pasha don't understand the Tesis. But if I would have looked at Rabbeinu Gershom instead, Rabbeinu Gershom says that the reason that the Zman of the rain has passed is because we already dealt with Kislev and Tevis and Shvat. It's already the Zman of rain is finished. So what are you going to be fasting more for? All the months have already passed. The Pasha reading of that is Yatza Zmana Shel Revia means that all these months have passed. So you don't have to put in a 14th or 15th fast because it's already the rainy season's over, which is the simple understanding of the Gemara. That's number one. Number two, we read the Shuv of the Rush yesterday, and I didn't bring it home all the way to point out. So the Rush wants to change the beginning of when you start saying Stin Talmud Bracha. You should be able to say it earlier, not have to go like the Bavel, but go like Eretz Yisrael. Say it earlier. And he wants to go later. Don't finish saying it on Pesach. Say it all the way through Nisan, through the rainy season continues on in the summer. So continue on saying it into the spring for sure. Don't stop just on Pesach. But while you saw in Germany when he suggested, people said, no, it's a good point, but like here we get so much rain, we don't have to really down for rain, like it's not a big deal. Then when he got to south part of France and Provence, so then in fact they did do the same Talmud Lavracha very early. And he was very happy about that. But when he said to make it also later, we can't do that without asking all the rabbis, and everybody agree, and it was a whole mice, and nobody was going to get that done while he was there. So he moved on. When he gets to Spain, so over there, when he's attempting to change the minhag, forget to make it earlier, but just to make it later, he gets a lot of pushback. But the rush in the tshuva there brings down what seems some to think is steer in the Rambam between the Pirush Mishnah and the Mishnah Torah, and he concludes that it's not a stira. And the basic argument is the difference between a makom and a medina, a city and a country. In a city, we say one thing. In a country, we say something else. When it comes to a city, you're a yachid. Even a big city, even a city like Nineveh, it's just one place. But if it's a whole Medina, it's a whole country, it's a whole land, that could be something different. And that's how he wants to answer up what it seems to be a steer between the Rambam, the Pirush Mishnah, and the Mishnah Torah. But also fundamentally, it would explain why Nineveh is not a contradiction to what he wants to do. Because even in Nineveh, when Rabbi is saying that the Bnei Nineveh are like Yechidim, we could pass on that 100%. Bnei Nineveh, even a big city, are like Yechidim. We're not going to change it for them. They should do it in Shemei Tefillah. But a rabbin, which would be not in Nineveh, but like Iraq, the whole country, that would be a different story. So you wouldn't, even New York City is a big place and a lot of people, that's you're not going to change. But America, right, Australia, a big place, that would be potentially different. Again, for all practical intents and purposes, it's not, but at least in theory, it could have been. All right, so we're up to today, the two dots. Perfect timing, right? We're starting now where we left off yesterday, right? The two dots on your dial and the base, the middle, towards the sort of the last third of the page where it says V'she'ela Shalom. right? So in the last 7 days of the fasts, so we're mamat in happy things. We don't do bin and shel simcha, right? We're not having weddings. We're not making fancy gardens. One of the things that we're mamayit is b'she'ela shalom. We're not saying hello, right? We're not saying hello. So Tana Rabbana and Zok the Gemara, Chaverim ein l'she'ela shalom b'neien. The scholars, Torah scholars, are also known as Chaverim, right? If you ever been to a Yekish shul or see Yekis getting aliyahs, they always want their father, not the, I don't know about themselves so much in non-Yekish shuls at least, but their fathers at least, they'll say, Yamaid XYZ, Ben Achaver, Reb, you know what, right? Why? Because the Chaver is the title of the appellation they gave to the special people in the community, right? Like I said, in the Spanish Portuguese communities, they gave the title of the Yachid, right? Like the Yechidim here. So the Chaver, meaning the people who are the Torah scholars, Ein She'ela Shalom B'nei. They do not say hello to one another during these series of 7 fasts for the rain. Am Ha'aretz She'she'elin Machzirun Lehem B'Sofa Rafa. But Am Ha'aretz, meaning people who are, not the most not the most learned. So when they say to them hello, Machzirun Lehem B'Sofa Rafa, they respond to them quietly. B'Kavid Rosh, right? Like downcast. Because you're really not supposed to be saying hello. Rashi notes that the reason that they're responding to them, why not just ignore them? The Rashi says in Shashol B'Sholim, Talmid Chacham Maxer Loi Mishum Eva. Right? Usually because Mishum Eva is you're afraid about a guy, right? We have at Tehrim, for example, Hatzel has to answer calls on Shabbos, even Goyim are calling, they have to answer calls. Why? One of the reasons given, Mishum Eva. You're afraid. What are the guys going to say if you going to rescue only Jews? It's a racist ambulance company. So here we're saying Mishum Eva about Yidden, that we're afraid. Am Ha'aretz, could be very angry, right? And the Gemara says about Rekiva Psachim, and then Beis over there, the Gemara says that Rekiva says that when I was Am Ha'aretz, I was gonna, kick the rabbis, right, or bite the rabbis like a donkey. In other words, that the Am Ha'aretz were people who were very upset. So at the rabbis, so if they're saying hello to you and you're ignoring them, you could have been in for beating. So therefore, you have to make sure to respond to them. Yeah. The Hamas Atzim v'Yoshvin ke'avelim. They have to sit and wrap themselves up like an avel, uchmenudin, and like they're in nidui, like they've been put into cherem. Like people who have been pushed away from the Rebbeinu Shalom until they get mercy actually from heaven. So they have to sit like avelim. They have to be enwrapped like avelim, be silent like avelim. If you remember the Gemara in Bavim and Beis, the Gemara in Brachas Bavim and Beis told us the igrid the beitam yeshtikusa, right? The schar of going to a avel's home is the silence that you have, right? That's why let's wrote down your idea in Shinayin Vav that when you go to an avel's house, you're not supposed to say anything until the avel says something. Right? That's the igrid the beitam yeshtikusa. So for Avelos, and since this is being done as Avelos, in a sense, the lack of speaking is part and parcel of that kind of sadness at the lack of the rain, the punishment that Hashem is bringing onto them. Just to point out that what we're saying in relation to this Avelos, we mentioned before about the fasts. That the fast of Tisha B'Av is the only fast of the 4 fasts that is mamish on Avelos, right? The other ones are to be Ma'at Tainug, Timur Rachim Shemayim, but it's not Avelos. The only one that has the Isser of the Chamishi Nuyim was Tisha B'Av. But these 7 fasts, right now we're ramping up the pressure, we're amping it up, so it has in it the Chamishi Nuyim. That's how, in part, that we're going to be also associating it with Avelos. Yeah. All right, Zot the Gemara. Amar Rabbi Lezer, Ein Adam Chashav Rashay Lipa Al Panav, Elam Kain Nen Ki Yeshua Benun. An Adam Chashav is not permitted to be falling on his face unless it's going to be answered like Yeshua Benun. Shneemar, because the pasuk says Vayomer Hashem al Yeshua, because the pasuk says by Yeshua, Kum lech, right? He says to him, get up. Lama zat anifla alpanecha. Why are you falling on your face? So I just want to mention over here. Actually, I should mention before I mention all this. I'll mention one other thing. The Gemara. Look at the Rashi. Rashi of Avel umenuda chayavim ba'atifa. Right. The we're sitting like Avelim and Menudim, people who are like in mourning or nidoi. So we're sitting there enwrapped, right? Because the lashon of the Gemara was behemis atfim v'yeshvin ka'avelim u'menudim. The Rashi is a bit of a different lashon. Rashi says the avel u'menuda chayavim ba'tzifa, right? The avel and the menuda, the mourner and the one in Nilu are chayavin to have atifa. They're chayav to be enwrapped. So Rashi says v'chsev al safam yata, because the pasuk says the al safam yata v'tami tami yikar is the pasuk there about in the end of Mitzera, about the Mitzera, that he has to go michutz lamachana, right? The Mitzera is the most mechuyev, right? Like the Tomei Mace has to go out of the machna shchina, but he could be in machna leviyah. But the Mitzera can't even be in machna leviyah; he has to even have machna Yisrael. Right? For practical intents and purposes, that would be he has to be outside of Yerushalayim. Right? The Tomei Mace could be in Yerushalayim; he could be even in the Harabayis, but the Mitzvah has to be very far out. So it's very weird, as the Rabbi Kiva points out, the Gilin Hashas, this Rashi just doesn't make any sense. It seems to be a mistake. So if you look at the Gilin Hashas, Rabbi Kiva says, look at the Gemara there in Tesvav in my garden, and the Gemara over there asks, what's the halacha about an aval? Does he need to have atafa? What's the halacha about Mitzvah? Does he have to have atafa? What's the halacha by and person in neither? Does he have to have atafa? And the Gemara literally brings that by Mitzvah. Yep, he does, and he brings down the pasuk of Asaf Miyata, which is literally a pasuk by Mitzvah. But by the Avel, as Ricky Vega points out, the Avel nafka ma'ikata mida izar li'cheskel loy sat al safam. It's a pasuk from Yecheskel, a different pasuk, loy sat al safam, not the pasuk of the Asaf Miyata. It's just simply not a pasuk. It's not correct. This pasuk is by Mitzvah, not by an Avel. So that's Ricky Vega's first kasha. Second kasha for Ricky Vega is by the menuda, by the person is in nido, it doesn't bring a pasuk in the Gemara. So Rashi seems to be saying that aval menuda chayim matifa, and they're both because of the pasuk of the Mitzvah. If Ricky Vega blind by tzarchin, I don't have an answer. I mean, this pasuk just seems like a mistake. I'm not sure this is a right. That's not Rashi, but it seems to me fundamentally just unless it's just referencing the Gemara, but the Gemara about Mitzvah is after these. If you look in the order of the Gemara, it talks about first the Aval, then the Menuda, then the Mitzvah. So, I don't know. I don't have a good answer to the question. Okay. So, next point I just wanted to mention quickly is the Gemara says here about the Belezer says an Eid Anam Chashav person who's a person is not permitted Lipol al Panav. He's not permitted to fall on his face. Elam Kainena Ki Yeshua Benun. What does it mean falling on the face? So when we say falling on the face, right? Remember the Gemara in Brachas on the end of the by the end of the fifth parak. The Gemara talked about 4 types of bowing, right? There's kriya, there's tachavaya, right? There's kida, right? There's different kinds of bowing. Neifan al panav is not necessarily considered bowing, right? That's like sort of like this. We do tachanun. That's not really bowing. So we're saying that, and that's in fact how we do tachanun. We're saying here, "Ein adam chashav rasher lipa al panav elim keinenu." What does that mean? So if you remember, the Gemara tells us about Mitzion and Tess. The Gemara tells us about Rabbi ben Horkin that every day he was a menuda, right? He was actually put in the cher. So he was davening, and his wife Ima Shalom, who was the sister of Rabbi Gamliel, every day she would interrupt his davening and stop him from falling on his face and saying tachanun. Why? Because she was afraid. And one day she thought it was Rosh Chodesh, so she didn't go in there. And it wasn't Rosh Chodesh, and he bowed on his face, meaning he did a tachanun. So the Gemara says that she saw he was doing it, she didn't stop him because she thought it was Rosh Chodesh. So he said, "Oh, you killed my brother." It turns out Kim Leo was on a boat and he capsized, whatever he died. So how could he do? How could he be? Any other kosher? Was he allowed to be nefal panav? Presumably yes, because Adam kosher, even if he was a menuda. What about a regular tzaddik? Is he able to fall on his face and do tachnon? If you look at Gemara in the end of Megillah, the Gemara there in Megillah and Chav Ches talks about the fact that the way we do tachnon is not literally falling on the face, but al tzida, we go like this. That's how we do it today. Is the Adam Chash not allowed to do that? So the answer is he's allowed to do that. But he's allowed to do that because it's part of the tzibur, it's part of everything. But for him to do it alone, that's what we're saying. When we say over here, Ein Adam Chashiv, Asher Lipa Al Panav, we mean to say that he's not the one who's bowing and everybody else is not bowing. Just to bow alone, that you only do that if you're like a chashiv person like Yeshua ben Nun. But to bow as part of a group, to bow as part of a larger contingent, that's not an issue, right? That's part of a tzibur. That would not be an issue at all. But by Yeshua ben Nun is the one bowing, and it fits nice with the pasuk. He's the only one bowing. Hashem is telling Yeshua, get up, enough. Nobody else is doing it. So everybody's watching. Everybody's like, oh. So then you don't do that because, in a sense, then you're, as it were, goading heaven into making sure to answer you. And if they don't, then you're going to be outed as not such a chashuv person. Hashem said to Yeshua, Kum lech, get up. Why are you falling on your face? Another member from Rabbi Lezer. Ein adam chashuv asher lach gersak. Again, an adam chashuv is not permitted to wear sackcloth. Again, we're talking here, presumably, similarly, just that he's the only one wearing the sackcloth, rather than like sort of everybody, right? If it's unique to him. Unless it's going to be answered like Yeharim ben Achav. Shenemar, the pasuk over there says there's a terrible, terrible story over there. The famine was so bad that a lady was complaining to Yehiram, the son of Achav, that she had a deal. The deal was with another lady that they were going to eat their children. One day they were going to have a steak, tartar with one son, and the next day they were going to have the steak with the other one's son. And so the first day, one woman sacrifices her child and eats it, and the next day the woman hides her child and she didn't have the food. It's not fair. She didn't honor her end of the deal. When the king hears the story, he rips his clothing, and he's very upset. Yeharim was a big Rasha, but the Gemara is saying, and the Gemara is certainly indicating, Rashi seems to understand it, that Yeharim was nene, for davening. From the psukim, from the Pashup Shalom psukim, it doesn't seem like he's davening. It doesn't seem very nice. He's threatening Elisha. Doesn't seem like he's really davening very much, but he was wearing sackcloth. That part is true. The Gemara says we can learn this out from that Adam Chasher is not permitted to be wearing sackcloth unless he's going to be answered like Yehiram. When he heard the words of this woman, he ripped his clothing. He was walking on the wall by Yara and the people saw and he saw that he had sackcloth. When he ripped his royal robe, right, he was wearing sackcloth underneath. So we're saying only an Adam Chashiv should be doing that. Rashi's lashon is Yehiram was a Rasha. However, Elish is an al Rav. He was fasting and wearing sackcloth because of the famine. Shahaya biyama vinet, and he was answered. It's true that the Jewish people were answered, but again, I'm not sure that from the Pashup Shalom Tzukim, it sounds like Yehiram was a davening that didn't get doesn't seem like that he was such a penitent, but he was wearing sackcloth. It's true. From the indication of the Gemara, it seems like he was being answered for its tefillah. But I'm saying from the Pashup Shalom Tzukim, where he's threatening Elisha, with his life, it just doesn't ring the same way to me. That the Pashup Shalom pasuk is that he's such a nice penitent, Yeah. Then is the Gemara. Not everybody is roy to be kareh their begadim. Not everybody is roy to be falling on their face. Moshe and Aaron fell on their face. Yeshua b'Kalev b'Kriya, and Yeshua and Kalev ripped their clothing. Moshe and Aaron fell on their face. As we're going to have in pasuk in not the sixth parsha, but next sixth parsha. Vayipol Moshe and Aaron al paneim b'fnei kol adas b'nei Yisrael. They fell on their face after the Meraglim came and they were saying how terrible the land of Israel is, and the people are crying, "Oh, we don't want to go into the land of Israel." So Moshe and Aaron fall on their face. Yeshua v'Kalev b'Kriya. Yeshua v'Kalev over there. The pasuk says. Yeshua v'Kalev b'Karu b'Gdeihen. Right. Yeshua v'Kalev and Yefuna Karu b'Gdeihen. So you see, by them, they were cutting their clothes. It wasn't simply enough to fall on the face. I have to just point out that this Gemara, not everybody is zecha, not everybody's roi to be able to cut their clothes or to put or to fall on their faces. And over here, falling on the faces is not like what we do in terms of altidem, like for taxon, we're falling on the face on a table, ideally on a table. That number one, it's interesting that we say the order is Le'akol B'Kriya V'Le'akol B'Nefila, which is not the order of the Psukim. Right? The order of the Psukim here is Nefila and then Kriya, but we seem to be reversing it in the Memra. Number two, when we say before Nefal Paneim, you see over here, this kind of a Nefila Paneim was literally, Pasuk says, Hayipol Moshe Aaron al Paneim. They fell on their face. It sounds like not they were bowing, but they fell down on their face. They felt no, the Muslims are bowing. No. Falling. The pasuk says Vayipol, they fell. Well, they didn't bow. Vayipol, they fell. So it could be that that's sort of the more no. That's exactly my point here. My point here is that Vayipol upon it was not prostration. It means that they were so shocked that the Jewish people don't want to go into the land of Israel. They fell on their face. It wasn't prostration. That's what I'm saying. That changes in terms of the meaning. What we're saying initially, when we said before, that kind of lipa alpanav, that's performative, right? That is part of a prayer. That's prostration. But the initial understanding of Moshe and Aaron al Paneim, that wasn't for sounds from the psukim. That wasn't because like now it's time for daven to Hashem. No, it was such a horror at the sight of the Jewish people begging not to go into the land of Israel, trying to get back to Mitzrayim, wanting to stone Moshe and Aaron. Like that sounds like it was just the utter shock. Yeah, the other like fainting, right? That kind of like just not able to handle the moment. Yeah, that's maybe correct. I should also just note that this line of the Gemara always reminds me of the line about Navardik Yeshiva. Right, the line about the Navardik. Anybody? No? All right, I'll tell you the quick line. Yeah. So the line in the Navardik Yeshiva was, a new Bach comes to the yeshiva and he sits down in base medrash and he sees everybody. Navardik was known, not like Slobodka or the covet of a person. So Navardik was all about how a person's very lowly. They were known that they would go into, the hardware store and ask for milk. So they should be berated. Get out! It's the hardware store. We don't sell milk. And they'll do these kind of things to be machniya themselves. So he's in yeshiva there, and he sees the I don't know, maybe during Gemara Seder, Musa Seder, whatever there was in the Seder they had, the people were saying, "I've been garnished. I'm a nothing. I'm a nobody." So the new guy starts saying, "Ich bin garnished. Ich bin a nobody." And the older brachim say to each other, he thinks he's a nobody. Not everybody's right to be a nobody, right? So not everybody's zeicha to be ripping their clothes and falling on their face. Only the special, only the elite, right? So the Gemara now says, again, this is Rav Shimon Nachmani without Rabbi Yonason. So Rav Zera or Rav Shimon Nachmani ask a question on this, that the Gemara is mashma, that Yeshua ben Nun and Kalev ben Yefuna, they didn't fall on their face. They just ripped their clothing. So he asked, Yahavik said, Yeshua, if the pasuk said, Vayipol Moshe Aaron al Panei, Lifnei Kol Adas Bnei Yisrael, and then it just said, Yeshua ben Nun v'Kalev ben Yefuna, Kar B'Gdeim, I might understand that you're right. Moshe Aaron fell on their face, and Yeshua and Kalev ripped their clothes. But Hashem, this said, Yeshua with a Vav. Now that says, Yeshua ben Nun v'Kalev ben Yefuna, Kar B'Gdeim, it's mashma that they didn't just simply fall on the face, but they also ripped their clothes. They did two things. The mashma ha v'ha avid. They did two things. They did both. Right? We had V'yashua Benun is written right after this pasuk about Moshe and Aaron falling on their face, and therefore it's mashma. It's Meisvel in Rishon, as Rashi says. It's adding to what we just saw. It's adding to what we just saw. They fell and they ripped. So don't bring like it. It's not exactly correct what the member is saying that only some people rip and only some people fall. No, Yeshua actually and Khalid fell and ripped. All right, so now we are in the next member of Blazer. Not everybody's zeichet to kima or hishtachavaya. Again, specific people. Malachim bekima. We're going to see that malachim are by kima, they get standing. V'sarim hishtachavaya. And sarim and the ministers, not the kings, they bow. What are we talking about? So Rashi, we don't have a Rashi on this page. You have to look at Rashi on Tezvav. Rashi on Tezvav is over here. So the second Rashi on the page, Rashi explains it. We're talking about La'asad Lavai. La'asad Lavai, L'kras Yisrael, when the Malachim and the Sarim of the nations are going to come greet the Jewish people, the Malachim Yirvakamu, the Malachim are going to be scared, they're going to be intimidated, and they're going to stand up. And the Sarim and the ministers are going to fall on their faces. So says the Gemara. The Malachim are going to stand up and the Sarim are going to bow down. So saith the Rebbeinu Shalom, right? The Redeemer of Israel, right? The holy nation. And now we're on the top of Tezvav Amud Aleph. Live Zoy Nefesh, to those that have been embarrassed and humiliated, meaning the Jews, the Mitzoyev Goy, to a humble nation, to a nation that has been mituab, right? Has been put down by all the other nations. Le'evan Moshe, to this nation of servants that have been serving others, meaning the Jewish people. So Malachim Yiru v'kamu, the kings are going to be afraid and they're going to stand. The Sar Mishtach Havaya, and the idea that the ministers are going to bow. This is literally the next words in the pasuk over there in Yeshaya. The Sif Sar Mishtach Havaya. The next words of the pasuk are Malachim Yiru v'kamu. The Malachim are going to be intimidated. They're going to stand, and the Sarim and the ministers v'yishtach, and they're going to bow. So that's mamish what? That's mamish approved to this statement of Rabbi Lazar. That depends on if you're a melech, if you're a sar. Same exact question like last time. Says the Gemara, if it would have said, and the ministers will bow, then I would have agreed, says Reb Zera, I would agree that that means then that the sarim are bowing. But hash the sarim v'ishtakavu. Now that it says melachim yirvakamu sarim v'ishtakavu, it sounds like it's in Moshe in Rishon that not only do the ministers bow, but they also are standing. So they're doing both, right? So hash it says sarim v'ishtakavu ha v'ha of it. They're doing both. They're both standing and bowing, meaning they're getting up and bowing. Fine. Now we have an additional point. And this one is not from Ablezer, but it is a similar kind of an idea in terms of breaking down a pasuk into two. So the Gemara says as follows: the Amar Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak, Afani Omer. Rav Nachman says, I also say something similarly, right? What does this remind us of? The Gemara back on Taanit, Beis Amud Beis. Remember the Gemara in the beginning of Taanit Beis Amud Beis, where Rebbe said, "What Omer Ani?" Right? Omer Ani, and we said over there that maybe maybe this is a lashon of humbleness, right? I quoted it from the Shem Tzon Malacham. And maybe Omer Ani is a lashon of humbleness, sort of like what we would say today, Lula de Mistafina, right? If I wasn't afraid, Ani Omer, I would say the following. Right? That's what it means, Omer Ani. And maybe Afani Omer is a sort of similar kind of a thing. But what did Nachman Yitzchak say similarly? Loi hakel la'irav le'akel simcha. Not everybody's zeichet. Lost love or haba. Not everybody is zeichet to the light and to the happiness. Tzadikim la'ira, the tzadikim, the righteous, they get the light. V'yisharim l'simcha, and the straight get the joy. They get the happiness. Rashi explains that the yisharim are on a higher level than tzadikim. Why? Because we have a pasuk. Tzadikim la'ira, the siv oyer zerulat tzadik. V'yisharim l'simcha, and the straight ones, they get the happiness. The siv l'yishrei leiv simcha. Right. So this points out. So why don't we say? Or Tzaddik Yisrael Simcha. Why don't we say that the Yisrael get Oira and they get Simcha? Let's say they get both. So the Bach here in the Girsa changed around a little bit in the Tesis, but if you look in the Girsa of the Bach, so the Bach explains that if that was the case, that you wanted to say that the Yishrei Lev got both Eira and Simcha, so then it should have said L'tzadik ul Yishrei Lev Eira. If you wanted to say that everybody was sort of getting everything, they should say L'tzadik ul Yishrei Lev Eira v'Simcha. But we don't say that. We're breaking it up, right? We're saying Or Zerul Tzaddik ul Yishrei Lev Simcha. That's mashma that the tzaddik is only getting the Eira, and the Yishrei Lev is getting the Simcha. It says Taisves. So therefore, we don't want to say that Ve'en Lam Kedil El Sharm Hai V'Hai Simcha V'Hai should be getting both, because Imkein the Yishrei Lev, right? Because then we would be saying that the whole thing is referring to the Yishrei Lev, and from the lashon of the pasuk, we wouldn't necessarily need to have that vav, right? Arzur Latzadik Yishrei Lev. It should have said without the vav. The fact of saying ul Yishrei Lev is mashma that they're getting only the simcha, but I don't really understand the grammar of it so well. Why they get simcha and not eira? That doesn't really make so much sense to me. How do you get to the level of simcha if you don't have eira? I don't know. All right, hadran alach me'emasai, hadran alach me'emasai, hadran alach me'emasai. Now we have an interesting thing in Taanit, which we saw in the 9th parak already at Brachas. If you remember, we had a situation where all the Mishnayos are shmushed into one Mishnah, right? In Taanit, in the 2nd parak, the 3rd parak, and the 4th parak of Taanit, all the Mishnayos in the Gemara are shmushed into one Mishnah. Instead of doing it the broken out way, the way we have it in the Mishnayos. Why? I don't know. Again, also the first parak in Sanhedrin is similar. So we have sometimes in the Gemara, when the Gemara takes the Mishnayos and smushes it together. This was one of the arguments of those that wanted to focus on learning Mishnah, who said that you have to learn Mishnah because you don't really always get the fullness of the Gemara, the Mishnayos, because of the fact that the Mishnah is not broken up the way the Mishnayos are broken up. And so they stressed that the Mishnah had to be learned separately. Okay. But it's interesting that in Taanit, in the first parak, we have it sort of broken out. In the 2nd, 3rd, and 4th, we do not. Dug the Mishnah. And now we know that we're talking here about what? The 3rd series of fasts. Right? We already had what? The 1st and 2nd and 3rd series of fasts already discussed in some detail in the various Mishnahs in the first parak. So now when we're starting out, we're just talking here about the last series of fasts. So says the Gemara, say the Taanit, and we already learned a lot about the last series of 7 fasts, right? We know it's 7 fasts. We know about all the inuyim they have to do. We know about they're closing the stores, and we learned about a lot of things, right? And they're closing the bathhouse, right? All the things that we learned. Yeah, and we also learned that instead of having 18 or versus 19 benedictions, right, you're gonna have an extra 6 over here. So we're gonna learn about the brachas over here. This is all in the last Seder of fast. So Seder Taanit, Kate says the Mishnah. What is the Seder of the fast? You put out the ark, right? The Aron Kodesh, you bring it out into the middle of the street. The nice and Ephar Makla Gabi Tachta and Gabi Hateva. And you put Ephar Makla, as Rashi explains. Sometimes you could have used the word Ephar and Offer interchangeably, right? The dirt, the dust, and the burnt ashes, right? Sometimes you use the word interchangeably, offer and afer. And that over here we want to say no, that it's not interchangeable. That's what we say afer makla. That has to be mamish burnt ashes, you can't just put dirt. Yeah, so you have to put that on top of the Aron Kodesh. That's a way of showing of mourning. We actually had the lashon of afer makla, if you remember in Brachos there on Chav Ches, by the Maisa of Gamliel of Yeshua, after the whole fight. So Yeshua, they try to get them to open the doors to let Rabbi Gamliel back in, and they wouldn't. So Yeshua wanted to go convince them. And he used a very odd parable. As I told you that, no one asked it, I don't understand it at all. The Gemara says over there that Yeshua went himself to the doors of the Beis Medrash, knocked on the door and said, listen, let Rabbi Gamliel back in. And he used the mashal. He says, about a kain, that's the one who wears the Shemana Begad, and the one who wears this big Guna should not wear the big Guna. The one who does the Hazaya shouldn't do the Hazaya. The one who and he gave various different metaphors about like the imposter is going to tell to the Kayan that your waters are Ephra Makla, that you can't do Hazaya. And I am perplexed. forever perplexed on this Gemara, and I never saw anyone ask the question, but this mashal to me is almost impossible to understand. Rabbi Gamliel is a Nasi. He comes from Hillel, comes from ultimately Shevet Yehuda. You want to use a mashal about him that he's a kohen? It's very sweet. It's very nice. But who was the Mamal Makim that you're not throwing out? You're throwing out Rabbi ben Azariah. Rabbi ben Azariah is 10 generations to Ezra. And Ezra was literally a kohen. Rabbi ben Azariah is a kohen. So your whole analogy of knocking him out because he's not an imposter is telling the kohen you're not good, but he is the kohen, and the one who you're talking about is not a kohen. So I've never been able to understand the mashal. But anyhow, over there uses the lashon Ephraim Maklan. Yeah, so it continues the Gemara, the Mishnah. I'm sorry. So you take the Ephraim Maklan, you put it not only on the Arin, you put it on Bereish HaNasi, you Bereish HaBezdin, you put it on the heads of the community. Each and every one puts it on their own heads. All right. So each person does it on their own head, but the heads of the community put it on. They get their put on their heads. Right. Hazakin Sheben Amulafnen Divrei Kavushin. Right. The elder of the community, he gives a shir, he gives a speech to try to inspire the people. What is the speech? Achenu, my brothers, he says, never banshi ninve. Doesn't say in pasuk by ninve vayar lekim esakim es tanisam. Doesn't say in the pasuk over there that Hashem saw their sackcloth and their fasting. Ela vayar lekim es masayim. Yishavu midarkam hara. It says he saw their bad deeds. He saw their bad deeds. And you can ask, and Marzchias points out already, and the Chavasir point out, what do you mean v'kabal hu aimer? The pasuk says, "Man yoel, rip your hearts. In other words, change your deeds. Don't rip your clothes." This is b'kabbalah, and mavayar lakim asmasayim is also from Yaina. That's not Kabbalah. Right? Kabbalah refers to Divrei Nevi'im. So why are we using the word of Divrei Kabbalah to refer to Yael and not to Yaina? What's the difference? All right, we'll have to leave that as a question for the moment. So Amdu B'Tfilah, they standing there and davening Maridin Lefnei Teva. All right, always a lashon of Imam Makim Karasicha. They go down to daven, so they stand to daven, but they go down before the table, before the urn. Zakin v'ragil. Somebody who's a zakin, he knows how to daven. Yesh lebanim. Right, you want to have somebody who has children, because otherwise you want to have rachmanis. Well, basically, Rekom, he has to be poor, right? He has to have his house empty so that he should have real needs. And so therefore he's going to really be davening hard. Kadeshayu libay shalom tefillah, so that his heart should be 100%, davening now for the safety of this community. Remember, now we say 24, not 19, right? Because now we're not just saying between Garland and Raifei, saying Anenu. Now we're saying 24 tefillahs. 24 brachas there in Shemona Esrei. We have another 6 brachas. Ve'eluhein. What are the 6 brachas? And the Mishnah has different opinions. Ve'eluhein, either zechronis shofars, right? That's 2, right? Kel Hashem tzarasa li karasi ve'aneni, right? Esa ene el harim memamakim karasicha Hashem and tefillah ani kiyatek. That would be all 6 different brachas. As we're going to explain, these would be the lead into these next brachas. So either that's one version, one opinion, right? So you start with Zechronis and Shofars that you would normally say on, Rosh Hashanah davening. So we would say that here. They wouldn't say Zechronis and Shofars as the 6 brachas. El Emer Tachtei and Rav Kiyeh Ba'aretz Dever Kiyeh and Asher Haya Devar Hashem El Yirmiyah Al Dever HaBetzeres. So 2 different other tefillahs that they said instead of saying Zechronis and Shofars, that they left just for Rosh Hashanah. And Va'omer Chaisman, and what would be the ends of the brachas? Al Rishayna, at the end of the first bracha, that's the ending of the first. We'll see it's really the ending of the first and the second. Al Ravius or Mishanas Shmuel Mitzvah Yanes Chem Yishma Mikot Sarkas Mayim Zebarat Hashem Shemet Tzaka. Al Chamish to Mishanas El Yov Ar Karmel Hu Yanes Chem Yishma Mikot Sarkas Mayim Zebarat Hashem Shemet Tefillah. Al Shis or Mishanas Yainu Ve'adog Hu Yanes Chem Yishma Mikot Sarkas Mayim Zebarat Hashem Ha'ina Beis Sarah. And then we have Al Shvius, which again doesn't make sense. We have six. That's why I said the first one counts for two. Shvius who Oimem Mishu Anas Dav Veshlam B'Nev Yerushalayim Hu Yanes Chavish Mekotz Akatz Mayim Azeh Baruch Hashem Rakan Al Haaretz. So these are the six pieces of Tehillim, and they end up with these endings that we all know from the various Anenus, and that would be the six brachas that are added to Shemana Esrei. We'll stop here.